that you've got this group of presenters. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible, right? Because some of you guys will be sick to death of hearing me chat by the end of the day. But you're going to feel the sympathy for these guys. These guys had me for 5 months, right? So yeah, they. I'm just going to introduce the project very quickly. Essentially, what we're doing here is we are following on from a year ago. I presented a year ago at this conference on this project, on what we were planning on doing. Fiona's probably going to talk a little bit about that when she comes on to talk. So I'm not going to run through all of that. I'm not going to go into real detail about what practice leadership is. I'm not going to go into real detail about kind of what the PERMA model is and that kind of stuff, because you can watch last year. That's a bit of a cop-out, but the really powerful stories is Hania, Lee, Jenna, the people that they've been supporting, and the just brilliant outcomes that they have supported those folks to experience, to achieve. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to waffle, and I am, aren't I? Okay, great to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to share screen, so I am going to be for Fiona, Hania, Lee, and Jenna. I'm going to be your Chris Whitty. So yeah, you can just you can next slide me and all that kind of stuff. Get you guys to introduce yourselves when your section comes on. Does that feel like the right way of doing it? All right.
Yeah.
Again, thank you all so much for being here and doing this, because it's great. The stuff I'm just delighted we've got the opportunity to be able to do this again. All right. Without much further ado, let's get this started. There we go. I'm always doing that. People tell me, so I can see your screen and I can see everything. Is this the right one? Yes, just checking. Yeah, you guys can all see your slides there, I'm sure. They'll be right. All right. Here we go. Toolbar, come on, get out of my way. I need to, what do we call it? Slideshow. These toolbars, move, please. There we go. Slideshow. Play from start. Right. Seamless. Absolutely seamless. Here we go. So, I'm going to try and be quick. Again, people use the chat function. Fiona, are we allowed to share the write-up from this report with people if they want to see it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Great. So we've a lot of the stuff you can hear today, we've got written up in a kind of evaluation report. So if anybody does want to see that, just give us a shout. All right. So let's go. So yeah, PBS UK. Fiona, we had a chat, October 2021, regarding development and implementation of a train the trainer practice leadership training, essentially. And some of the conversations, Fiona, was about how do we develop something that really makes a difference, that we can actually check to see what kind of difference it makes? Because I think for a lot of commissioners and folks, there's a lot of money being spent on stuff and we don't really know what kind of impact it's having a lot of time. So some of the questions of interest included: can practice leadership support the achievement of goals for people receiving paid support? Will the achievement of goals improve quality of life for the people receiving paid support? And can a training program develop capacity for practice leadership within services? And I think you'll hear from the guys when they talk, but one of the real differences here is, are you guys all, these were all supported living settings as well, weren't they? Actually, yeah. Which most of the stuff on practice leadership's been kind of residential services. So you guys are pioneers, I think is the term I'd use. The focus was on the PERMA model. I think you'll hear from the guys. I think everybody loved the PERMA model. I'm yet to come across anybody that's, when they've seen it implemented, doesn't just love this stuff. So I'm not going into too much detail on that. Martin Seligman's PERMA model about wellbeing. Again, you can see our last presentation for that. But wanted to talk about those kind of components of practice leadership. So the course was centered around working with these guys here to ensure that we focus on quality of life for the person. That's one of those key components of practice leadership. And the PERMA model was our kind of vehicle for doing that. So that was our kind of vehicle for ensuring that there was that person-centered focus, if you like, and quality of life. Allocating and organising staff, that was about the resources these guys used, about being clear about the staff that you're kind of going to target next with your EDI coaching and those kind of things. The third component about coaching staff, the team all used the EDI model, Roy DeVoe's EDI model, which is a kind of beautifully simple kind of coaching model. And then speaking about kind of how to review that practice leadership. So these are the kind of 4 major components of practice leadership that we discussed and kind of the guys worked through on the course. Just quickly, rubbish slide, but I just wanted the audience to see that this was a longitudinal program. Essentially, I think that's something that's really important. And so it's kind of one system-wide integration day where we met with people's managers and all that kind of stuff. And we tried, didn't work for everyone, but say, these guys are going to be busy doing this. Like, you're going to need to figure out how to support them to implement it back in the services. And yeah, some people got really good support, I think. Some people maybe not, but I don't want to get anyone in trouble, so I won't say anything else. And then we did a couple of kind of workshops, so really on the PERMA model, on the kind of concept of practice leadership. We went through the workbooks and that kind of thing. But then what we did was we all came together kind of once a month, and people spoke about the progress they'd had or the challenges that they'd faced. And we kind of had that peer kind of workshop, essentially. In between those sessions, we had access to a one-to-one with myself where the guys could talk through anything that was kind of challenging. So we deliberately set this up to be a longitudinal program, periods of kind of teaching, for want of a better term, but interspersed with kind of periods of practice, the guys actually being out there and doing this, and then being able to come back and bring that. So we're able to work through some of those kind of contextual challenges. And then the final presentation and portfolio submission, which the guys all loved. They said it wasn't stressful at all. It was probably one of the most enjoyable things about it. But they'll tell you, yeah, they're all nodding. And look, we've been through it before. You know, I just want to be really clear and upfront. What a great group of people these guys were to work with. It was just absolutely fabulous, because it was smack bang in the middle of some of the really difficult stuff around COVID. All of you guys had major staffing challenges. You had major things to work through, and still have some awesome stuff to talk about today. So I'm going to try really quickly you don't need to see that slide, to chuck over to you guys. Just want to be really open and upfront and honest. So not everybody finished this course, and there was a bunch of different reasons. This was a pilot project, so there's a lot of stuff to learn. 7 folks completed. Quite a few didn't finish, often citing kind of COVID as reasons. Some said there was they didn't see the fit with the individuals they were supporting. One person left the organisation, and some people, they just disappeared into the ether. We never heard from them again. So I don't know, it's something I said, I don't know. But anyway, so just want to be really clear that the kind of results that we're going to talk about today are for a small group of people. So, you know, I definitely talk about this as emerging. I'm not sitting here going, we've nailed this, this is perfect, we've absolutely nailed it, and kind of this is the way to do it for everybody. But I think we learned a lot. And as you'll see, there's some great outcomes. So for the 3 folks you're going to see today, this was some of the pre and post data in terms of the kind of wellbeing surveys. So that social validity type stuff. We used the Office for National Statistics evaluation tool in terms of wellbeing, and it looked at life satisfaction, looked at people feeling that their life experiences are worthwhile, and it also looked at happiness. So as you can see, for everybody, there was improvements in life satisfaction, in feeling that life was worthwhile, and in terms of happiness, which was really cool, as well as the stuff you're going to hear the guys talk about today. So these are just the summary of that data, is that for the folks that kind of went all the way through this course, life satisfaction improved on average 28.57%, according to that information. People feeling like their life was more worthwhile, the activities they were engaging in worthwhile, 88.89% improvement, and happiness 84%. Again, happy to talk through that with anybody. But look, I said I was going to shut up, get over to the guys really quickly. I just wanted to give you a summary of the kind of program, and now I am going to shut up, and I'm going to pass over to Fiona. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks ever so much, Paddy. Hello, everyone. My name is Fiona Gordon. I'm a Social Care Commissioner and work for Plymouth City Council. And it is my absolute pleasure to be able to share the learning in more detail with you, and to introduce the most important people, the people who did all the incredibly hard work. And I can't emphasize that, especially in the context of what they were actually having to do. So absolutely applause to them. But yeah, can you put this next slide on, please, Paddy?
Yeah, I was just clapping, sorry.
Just to say, I'm not sure where you are all from across the country, to introduce you to Plymouth, which is a beautiful part of the southwest of England. And today we're kind of talking from the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership, Devon Learning Disability and Autism Partnership, who very kindly funded this work as well. So thank you very much to them. I'll give you a very brief overview, and then obviously I will hand you then over to my colleagues who will talk it through with you in detail, which are Hania, Lee, and then Jenna. Okay, so slide 3, if that's okay. Thanks. That's my bit. I've gone through that quickly. So if we kind of cast our minds back to a world before COVID, Plymouth was actually starting its work on kind of engaging with the social care market to think about how we could increase and understand better around supporting people to live really good lives in the community. And we started to develop kind of close links with the University of Plymouth. And this was directly led in partnership with Live Well South West, who are our integrated health and social care provider, and especially the community learning disability team. And our main aim of this network, which we set up in around 2018, was to actually look at bringing people together to share really good practice and to kind of learn and think about how we were going to implement PBS, and obviously listening to some of the presentations today, especially about things around kind of contextual fit. I think knowing that now and reflecting back in 2018, I think, you know, the journey that we went on, we began to realise that, you know, there's different ways and different models of being able to do things, but the actual events themselves enabled us to be able to understand the challenges that were in place for such a broad range of providers and support providers in enabling people to live good lives in Plymouth, about how we can actually realistically implement change. But I think these events, more than anything, because they were face-to-face as well back before COVID, enabled us to see and to hear and to listen what was going on. But the events themselves were set up between the council, as I said, Live Well South West, and the behavioural advisors, and obviously close links to the University of Plymouth. So big shout out to Leanne Eastman from the CDLT, to Phil Morris from Haven Care and the team, and obviously Phil G from Plymouth University as well. So, you know, we did have some big plans in how things were going to change and move forward. Next slide, please. We were starting to think about how we could bring some really important people down to Plymouth and actually talk through and help people to kind of understand some of the learning that you know, back in 2020, and sort of share with them around what we want to do, what we thought was really important, and looking at how we were going to train the workforce and develop and try and support change as well. At that point in time as well, we actually had some money that we could actually put forward to the market to test and change the way that things were being delivered. Things like uses of assistive technology to kind of back up different kind of ways of supporting people. But I think it was then that we began to see that sometimes an idea in practice doesn't always implement itself in the way that you want it to do. Next slide, please. So actually, as a network, we began to look at some of these kind of issues that we were having, and how some of the projects that we were looking at and the ways that we were trying to implement PBS and change quality of life, how they were working, where they worked and where they didn't work. The themes that we saw were, and obviously now reflecting back on it, it is kind of common sense, where we were able to kind of understand around the close working and the close support for frontline staff, and actually where we've had examples of that, and actually how that actually worked much better. And this this isn't a criticism to anybody, and I think especially with the context of COVID, and how difficult, and and how much that amplified everything, and we're not here to to criticize managers, and we understand how difficult it is to actually support people and be able to deliver that in a really good, safe way. We began to see those areas where close working, modeling skills, and really making a change count right at the front line were starting to work. And some other providers in Plymouth as well had started to look at things like improving their practice leadership as well. So I think once we all got together within the PBS network that was happening in Plymouth, we began to think about, could we test this out, and thinking about, as Paddy said, around the use of PERMA and Seligman's work around kind of positive psychology, how could we make this work? So we got together. We were at that point in time as well aware of some money that was coming down from the NHS, and we put together a bid to our Devon Learning Disability and Autism Partnership, and then obviously COVID hit. We had this bid, we actually got the money, and we waited. Next slide, please. And in 2021, when we all thought that things had calmed down, didn't we? Do you know what I mean? And I think we were all so positive. We thought, this is it, we're back to normal again. We've had a year of difficulties, and how people had to really work so incredibly hard just to keep people safe. And we were aware of all the work that we'd done previously to actually really try and improve and get things in a better place. So the coming together, we thought a train-the-trainer qualification would be really good. And obviously we wanted that to be delivered by PBS UK. And most importantly, we wanted to have that evaluated through the University of Plymouth. And we were very, very lucky to get the lovely Andrea. And the actual, the plan went out, and organisations were able to express an interest in whether they wanted to take part. And it's very interesting looking at the evaluations as you go on, the actual, the way that you applied for the course, it was very, very clear in what was expected of it. But of course, we now can reflect and understand the context of what people were actually trying to survive in. So we wanted to look at, as we said, the use of PERMA, and how could we demonstrate really good outcomes for people across people that have been supported and staff teams, and actually think about whether that had any increase in around quality of life, reducing stress, increasing job satisfaction, and share that with provider market. So this was actually put out late in 2021, and again, little did we know what would happen at the end of 2021 into 2022, and how that would again affect the market. And looking back at the statistics, you can see it obviously. So I think that this shows the incredible work that the people who are going to talk to you today, how they actually managed to do that, I do not know. And I think it would be really good to look at possible for the future, that how we can actually replicate this again in a much, hopefully, an easier set of circumstances for people to actually work to. But I can't say how proud we are of everybody, and actually how they actually managed to achieve the work that they did. Yeah, I would like to thank them on a kind of a personal note, and on behalf of Plymouth and Devon, for the work that you all did, because I think you need to be congratulated. But I would like to hand over first and thank you to Hania. Is that okay?
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you. Hi all, my name is Hania Tashimska-Edwards. I'm the group head of PBS for Salute and Care and Education. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about my experience of the course, and really concentrating on the outcomes that the course had for the focus person that I was supporting, but also for the wider team. So kind of significant part of my role is to be the practice lead in services. But my involvement sometimes is quite episodic. So it might be some intensive support for a period of time. And then quite often I have to move on to another service or another individual. And I kind of recognize that with that intensive input, there are some good outcomes for people, but actually, when we think about how sustainable that is over a longer period of time, actually there are quite significant difficulties when that intensive input is withdrawn. So for me, really, I wanted to be part of this course to kind of find out where the more structured approach, I suppose, to a practice leadership would support kind of the system change in the services and the support that is being offered to the individuals. Okay, Paddy, next slide, please. So firstly, I just want to kind of set the scene. I chose a setting that was a supported living setting, and is a kind of operates on a current cluster model. So there's 6 individuals being supported at one location in the individual bungalows. And initially, I concentrated on developing a perma plan for one individual in particular. So that person is in their 30s, they are autistic, they have learning disability and dual sensory loss, but also have diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder and epilepsy. So there's an awful lot going on for that person. And also, he has lived kind of independently in the community. However, following some really traumatic experiences and abuse that he experienced, his kind of well-being really deteriorated. And that resulted in him being detained under the Mental Health Act in a hospital. So he was eventually discharged in 2018 and has been supported in a community setting since, initially in a residential setting and later in a supported living provision. But he lost loads of confidence and self-esteem while being in hospital. And some of those really great skills and opportunities to practice those skills were really lost. And I think one thing that I will always remember is parents during kind of my initial involvement saying that he's a shadow of his former self. So the person that they were seeing post-discharge from hospital is very different to the person that they know him to be. And I thought that was really sad. So he was kind of my focus person. And we started thinking about developing a perma plan for that individual. So I will talk a little bit about that. Paddy, if you could, thank you, change the slide. This is really nice, isn't it? Having a little minion. Okay, so so we kind of completed the perma plan and linked the goal to each of the domain of the plan. We, for example, recognized that being proud of himself gave him a positive emotion, that building positive rapport through kind of completing activities together supported the domain of relationship and engagement. And that having more independence and feeling empowered gave him some meaning. And as you can imagine, in a hospital, and because of all the bad experiences that he had, he probably lost a lot of control over his life. And finally, kind of having more confidence in kind of his abilities and having his own home gave him a sense of accomplishment. So based on all those things, we set a really, really simple goal, a simple goal of making his own lunch in a kitchen every day. And we started tracking the progress against that goal over a 4-week period. And we have not always been successful in achieving the goal. We have not always been successful in supporting him to achieve it. But there were other factors that, as Fiona kind of alluded to, you know, either COVID outbreak and kind of the key people in the service were not available, or he also had his whole bungalow redecorated with which then led to him not being able to make his own lunch. However, at those times, we kind of referred back to our perma plan and started thinking about what other opportunities can we provide them with, what other activities linked to the perma can we do that he likes and enjoy. And in that week where he was not able to work towards the goal, we have spent an awful lot of time out in the community doing other things. completing the PERMA plan for that individual in itself was quite challenging. Even though it's very, very valuable, but it's so important to remember and kind of think about what is important to the person rather than what's important for them. And keeping a person at the kind of forefront of your mind all the time is something that we should do naturally, but sometimes, unfortunately, that everyday tasks, keeping people safe, making sure that if someone's got epilepsy, that the protocols are followed, that you kind of monitor all those things. Those are the things that staff think about more than actually about who the person is, what they want from life, and how we can support them in achieving that. So that was really, really lovely to do, just concentrating again on what is important to the person. And I suppose the other challenging thing in regards to completing PERMA plan for individuals is that sometimes if people are not able to communicate their needs and wants effectively, then it does take a lot more thinking about what really adds the meaning to their life, what is important to them, and what is meaningful. So we kind of learned quite a lot throughout the process, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but I think one of the important things is about understanding the flexibility, and Paddy was amazing keeping us focused, because I can be quite, quite focused on one thing, and kind of learning that the flexibility is important, that evaluation, reflection throughout this process was really, really important. So learning that was important to take on from this whole process. So we kind of use regular evaluation and reflection with the link team that was supporting the person to make changes and adaptation to the goal and an overall plan of how we're going to support the person to make that goal more achievable. Okay, and that also allows us to, again, keep the person in mind at all times throughout the whole process. So, for example, we have learned quite early on and recognized through the monitoring and reflection that at times where the individual was distressed during lunchtime, he would lose the opportunity to complete the goal. And at times, staff would not necessarily make additional attempts to encourage the person to participate at a later time when they were ready to do so. So we changed the goal from making lunch every day to just making a meal every day. So, and then started monitoring that. Thank you, Paddy. Next slide, please. So now just thinking about the best thing. So that's the outcomes. This is the thing that really makes it real. So not only that little goal led to him building his confidence and improved his self-esteem, but the outcomes did not just stop there. So apart from him saying to all the staff and everyone that he was the best cook with a massive smile on his face, which really made us happy. We also seen him engaging in a range of other activities. So things like doing repairs in his own home, using tools, which is something that I know staff wouldn't have attempted previously, potentially because they would be concerned about the risks. But actually, they were happy to try it. They were happy to support him through that. So he also engaged in a number of community activities that were new to him and discovered a passion for gardening. For example, he planted a tree in memory of one of the family members who passed away, and also was making plans to kind of create a veg patch in his garden. So doing all those activities also led to kind of more family contact that potentially was a little bit more meaningful for him as well, because it gave him the opportunity to share all those great things that he's been doing. So it started that conversation with him and his family. And and in return, he was getting a lot of really positive praise from the family, which also increased his self-esteem. So even though the goal might seem quite trivial and small, it opened a range of other opportunities to him. And since the course finished, the engagement in those activities in his home, as well as in a community, it increased. So since we finished the course, he tried a range of other activities, like climbing, as you can see, like swimming. You know, he's been visiting all the local kind of fire station, police station, and spent some time with the lifeguard. So he's been doing an awful lot of really great stuff on top of continuing kind of exercising his skills and building those skills in the kitchen. The team leaders through the whole process as part of this practice leadership course allowed for the outcome and that positive change to not only continue post the course, but also to continue and kind of evolve, which is a great thing. Next slide, please, Paddy. But the impact that I've witnessed was not only limited to the person themselves, but also to the staff team and the whole service. So it felt like a really restorative process for the staff team, who were kind of like more open of trying new things, not afraid to take positive risks. And they continue having a really good idea of how to apply the PERMA plan to improve the well-being for that individual, but also other people that live at the location. It also really improved the staff confidence. It kind of created the ripple effect or chain reaction. And what was really interesting when we did our final presentation as part of the course, everyone who was involved seen exactly the same thing. So that kind of chain reaction allowed staff not to really be just confident with supporting the person, but also showed more initiative. And the attitude really changed from, oh, what if this happens, or we can't possibly do that, to more of a, we can do it, or let's at least try it. So that became that new motto for the team who were supporting that person and other people in the setting. So kind of allowing to refocus, again, through this process, it allows us to refocus not only just about caring and keeping people safe. And that is, as Fiona said, during the COVID, that's pretty much all we've been doing. It was all about keeping people safe and caring for them. But this whole process allowed the staff team really to start thinking about, you know, supporting people to achieve their goals and supporting people to live their best lives. And for me, I suppose, on personal level, and kind of professional level, when I reflect back on it, this kind of whole process confirmed to me that practice leadership kind of allows that sustainable cultural change that can be quite systematically embedded in everyday practice. So allowing team leaders to become those practice coaches, allow that momentum to keep on going even after that kind of intensive input is removed. So, sorry, next slide. Just kind of some parting thoughts about what's next for us as an organization. So I suppose, you know, being part of the process allows us to see that PERMA will work across my wider organization, and how kind of setting those really small goals with individuals lead to some really great outcomes. So as a result, we are looking at focusing and using PERMA as model alongside our PBS and our active support approaches to kind of enhance those outcomes for the individuals we support. And we also kind of recognize, and I'm sure that everyone who is listening will have the same experience, that actually training alone doesn't really give us the desired impact on practice. So using practice leadership as a way to embed that knowledge and skills in everyday support is a really great kind of vehicle to do that, really. So I think with practice leadership and PERMA model, both of those will really improve the effectiveness of the way we are working with people in our services and lead to improvement in their quality of life. Thank you. That's all from me, but I just want to kind of like last note, I suppose, just to say to everyone, if you get an opportunity to attend a course like that, even though it's hard and it takes a lot of effort, it is actually really worth it. Thank you.
And amazing, thanks. Lee, I believe we're coming over to you next. Hania.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Lee.
No worries. Okay, hi everyone. My name's Lee Millman. I work for Haven Care in Devon and Cornwall. Kind of done lots of different training previously around practice leadership. So this was really interesting because I was quite interested in learning more about the PERMA model before starting this course. So yeah, it was really important that I was able to invest time in it, and it did take some time, but it was really useful, and the training wasn't quite like anything else I'd experienced before, in a good way, not in a bad way. In a brilliant way, actually. So next slide, please, Paddy. Yeah, thanks. So just wanted to give you an overview of the person that I was I'm planning for, and why I planned for them. So I planned for a person that we've been supporting for around the last 20 years. He was somebody, or is somebody, who is it struggled a little bit with COVID. It had a really limited effect on lots of the things that he previously liked to do. Here's someone who lives in supported living. We needed a restart really on where we were at with him, because of the kind of stop nature of COVID, where some restrictions are in place and other times it eased slightly. It really did have quite an impact on what he liked to do on a day-to-day basis. So it gave us the opportunity really to restart where we were at with our thinking, and being able to use a PERMA plan to really start to bring out some of the skills that he had before, that had probably not been used for a while, and wanted to do this with the team. So the team had lost a little bit of confidence in what they were doing as well. There have been a couple of changes. One of the really positive things for me was that I had a really, really good team leader in this team, who I say I was a bit lucky with him, but he really took to the PERMA and the skills teaching and working with the rest of the team. So it was really, really good to have that. I knew the person really well. I've been supporting him in some way, shape or form for around the last sort of 14 years or so. Supported his move from residential into supported living. Could I have the next slide, please, Paddy? Fantastic. So this is an overview of him. So he's in his 50s, absolutely loves being outdoors. He's somebody who loves to be active, really enjoys being busy. He's quite an infectious, sometimes a little bit of a wicked laugh. He's quite a character. He does share a house with one other person, and I'll kind of touch on a bit later how this impacted on them as well. He has one-to-one support for 10 hours a day, and then he has some shared support for the rest of the day and overnight. Like I just said, he previously lived in residential care from a young age until his 40th birthday, where he moved into supported living and his own home, with an individualised team there based on his needs and understanding him. For really long periods of his time after his life, he was someone who was really, unfortunately, kind of really heavily medicated on some quite strong antipsychotic medications, and that process to reduce those down took over around about 8-9 years to really get out those antipsychotic medications out of his system. When we were doing that process, actually, we had a psychiatrist who came out and said, "You'll see a different person." The medication that he was taking at the time, they said it'll be like a curtains lifted almost. And we really saw that after that medication was taken, reduced and removed. Obviously, when that did, we really started to see who he was as a person. The character that he had or has really started to show, and we were really getting a true sense of him. And we kind of had that opportunity then as well to really start to explore. He does have a learning disability, and also on the autistic spectrum. So that does kind of impact on his life quite significantly. Could I have the next slide, please, Paddy? So what we did was start to put together a PERMA for him. It was really important to really understand what makes him who he is. So we wanted to explore that through the PERMA. Worked with the team and kind of my knowledge as well of the person, and what it really means to him to experience things like positive emotions. This is a bit of a summary of the PERMA because there was quite a lot of information in the PERMA, so I've had to take sections of it out, but try to summarize it all really. So we were looking at things like when he was really experiencing positive emotions, he would be things like singing quietly to himself, humming, big smiles, sat down at times, looking relaxed and comfortable. Sleep was a really big factor as well. When he sleeps well, you know he's in a really good space as well. He does have a really kind of focused look on his face as well when he's positive, because it's the you know, what's next, what can I do, or what can I be engaged with. For him, it was really important that he was able to feel relaxed, content, comfortable in his surroundings, and feeling like he's in a really good place. It was also important that for him that he had those people around him that were able to see that as well. And that also puts the staff team at ease, whilst be able to support him. Could I have the next slide, please, Paddy? Okay, so for the engagement section of the PERMA, looked at what kind of things that he likes to be doing. He likes to be busy, he likes to be active. He is somebody who likes to be doing things around the house, out and about as well, going to the shops, going walking, loves being on, we're really lucky we've got Dartmoor right on our doorstep. Loves being out on Dartmoor. Got some really stunning coasts as well, so he loves being out walking on beaches or coastal paths, that sort of thing. Routine is really important to him as well, being able to have the same routine on a day-to-day basis kind of reduces down any of those anxieties, makes him feel more relaxed. It just seems to be really important part of his day. As I said before, he likes to be out and about. He also likes to be out he's got his own car as well, so he likes being out in that. Anything that's kind of bright, colourful. Finding Nemo is a favourite for him. Watched it for many years, and I've seen that film many times as well. But it's great to see. It's really good for him. Like saying along those lines as well, anything that's sensory. Loves anything water related, which helped with kind of the planning of the skills as well for him. Having something to eat and drink out somewhere, loves just being out, cafes, restaurants, anywhere really, pubs, that sort of thing. And those are things that are all really important to him, and know that we can get some really good engagement with him when he's doing that, and that all helps towards that his well-being really. Could I have the next slide, please, Paddy?
Lee, just sorry to interrupt just quickly. It could be, I'm just worried we're going to run out of time for Jenna.
Yeah. All right.
And
I'll speed up a little bit.
No, it's all right, because it's so interesting.
No worries.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
So, where was I? Sorry, relationships. So, it's a summary of his relationships. Things like really important bits to him are people that know him, his history, his routines, the things that really make him that person, and being able to put themselves in his shoes at the times where he might be feeling a little bit anxious, and having that really good rapport with him, and that confidence in people around him as well. Those are all really important things to him. Next slide, please, Paddy. So for the meaning for him, value being busy and active. what's going on around him, likes to be involved in that. It particularly gives him it seems to give him a real sense of achievement and purpose as well. And that structure and those routines and those sort of things gives a really good value. And he looks so happy when things go well for him. Next slide, please, Paddy. Okay. Like I was saying a bit before, having something that would give him meaning would also really kind of give a sense of accomplishment for him. Having those kind of physical positives as well that he sees at the end of the day are like, you know, those things that have gone well for him. I think previous history is really important to acknowledge that things around him previously and that kind of impacts on his life, and being able to explore who he is as a person. Right, the next slide, please, Paddy. So what we wanted to do was involve him in his day-to-day activities, because we know that gives him a real sense of purpose and that sense of pride in what he does on a day-to-day basis, giving him that sense of purpose. And it was important to do that, and we wanted to do that through the skills teaching and skills development. You can go to the next one, please, Paddy. So the skills plan, quite a small one really, was based on for him to be washing his dishes at least after a meal that he has once a day minimum to start with. We know that it's something he likes to be part of doing. It gives them a real sensory aspect through the sensory feedback, through the washing, soapy water, that sort of thing. Easily integrated into part of his daily routine. It follows on from another natural routine with meal times. And it was a natural progression to move on from there onto the next sort of stage in terms of skills teaching. It also gave us that real it gives him a real sense of meaning and achievement as well. So next slide, please, Paddy. So what worked really well? The person that I worked with, the team leader in this case, took the plan and the goal and just went with it. He was able to support the person through everything really quickly and achieved a lot in quite a quick place. And actually it was really able to adapt the goal onto the next thing and onto the next thing. And we were able just to move through the day with different plans and supporting him to achieve more and more. It had a real positive impact on the quality of life for him. You know, the sense of well-being, you can really see it in him, that how well he was and how much he seemed to enjoy what he was really doing. It also led on to other plans for the person you live with, and also other members of the team adapted really quickly and got involved and engaged in the goal. And also the team leader worked with them through that as well. So that was really positive. Next slide, please, Paddy. What didn't work so well? We had COVID. There was a COVID outbreak twice for within the team, and then for the person himself, bit of a start-stop approach. There was a little bit of inconsistency through that time because of staff changes to cover rotas and things like that. Confidence within the team. But that worked quite well with the team leader going in and then actually coaching staff through that as well. It did change some of the steps that could be done or couldn't be done. So it was something that impacted on that. Next slide, please, Paddy. So for us, really, just a summary, the PERMA profile enabled us to really reflect on his life and what he values. Gave us that reset that we were looking for. It's given the team some structure as well, having that kind of plan in place to be able to work through. Really positive around the team leader, adapting quickly to the plans. Like I said before, there's a natural progression day to day, and there was also better quality of life for the person. Things he achieved was great, and really great to see where he is now. For me, training really great, really enjoyed it. It's being able to, we've been able to organisationally to take this away and reflect on where practice leadership sits within the organisation. And actually we think that we need to sit it more in amongst teams where practice leadership is in its truest sense. Yes, that's it from me. So yeah, thanks very much.
Amazing. Thanks, Lee. Thank you so
Speak to
much.
it.
I'm sorry.
all right. That's all right.
Jenna, I know you're morning
on.
for this. Yeah, 8
Let's
minutes.
do it.
Over to you. Let's go. Let's roll.
Let's go. So, yeah, like Lee and Hania, I was on the positive behaviour support for practice leadership. This was new to me. However, having worked in care for 22 years, I'm still really interested to find the holy grail of support models, I think, within supported living context and domiciliary care, because I still don't feel we're close, but we might get closer with every bit we do. So next slide. So at the Developmental Society, we look to empower people and do a lot of collaborative thinking, and we specialise in the support for people with learning disabilities, autism, physical disabilities, and look to how we can implement different strategies in the community for people to live independently and without that reliance on support. Next slide. So synopsis really was picking a gentleman who I've known for some time. He's an aging gentleman at 74 years of age, living in his own home, having 4 visits a day, but times can vary from very short visits to 45 minutes up to 3 hours. And generally had been leading a pretty independent life previously and was able to access the community as and when he wanted. But Mr. A has a degeneration of his lower spine, and it resulted in him not being able to mobilise independently outside of the house or the community safely. He was having a lot more falls. This was leading to a lot more safety concerns and issues. So after assessment with the physiotherapist, Mr. A was provided with a wheelchair to access the community in. This wheelchair was a carer operated wheelchair because Mr. A wouldn't have the dexterity to have a self-propelling wheelchair or be able to manually operate some electronic devices, unfortunately. Support staff in the team were not familiar with using a wheelchair. We support lots and lots of people that are actually quite physically able. So this was quite new to this staff team. So their confidence levels in embracing using a wheelchair in the community were not fabulous. And with that, I think you naturally then have an avoidance. And so Mr. A became a little bit more frustrated, a little bit more depressed that he couldn't access the community as and when he wanted. You know, and that frustration came out in different behaviours, and things just got really difficult for him. So it was really simple. Next slide, Paddy. That the goal in itself was going to be really simple, and that was to go shopping once a week at Morrison's. It was simple as that. It's somewhere like Mr. A likes to go. He liked to go there, to go to the cafe. He liked to go and pick up a few bits and pieces out of the shop that he liked to get. And he was really good, and it's something that he genuinely, from the permit, kind of valued as well. It was clear that that was something that he really enjoyed to do once a week. Next slide. Come on, Paddy, I'm not boring you yet. So PERMA, so the PERMA that you've had Hania and Lee talk about them in quite a lot of depth, so I'm not really going to go into the PERMA in great depth, but it was one of the key elements for me, so and probably the most enjoyable part. So after experiencing 2 years of chaos and pandemic and everything else, sitting and completing the PERMA with Mr. A supported me to actually reset. I don't know about Mr. A, but it certainly grounded me a little bit. So, and it supported me to not focus on the prescriptive needs. And by that, I mean, during COVID, I think we were all kind of focused on that prescriptive needs to make sure everyone was kept safe and not on the bits that actually that person necessarily valued. And I also think, having supported this gentleman for a really long time, having completed the PERMA, it's surprising actually how many assumptions you make because you know the person or you think you know that person. So you're in a risk of making assumptions. So actually sitting and doing the PERMA and really listening really taught me an awful lot about Mr. A than perhaps what I thought I knew. The task analysis, this was harder, I'm not going to lie. Breaking down the support in terms of how we are going to support Mr. A in his wheelchair to access the community. It wasn't easiest to list. It seemed a straightforward aspect, but actually there's so many variables that sometimes you have to consider and build into that task analysis. For example, for us, it was, you know, it depends on Mr. A's chosen mode of transport, on how that task analysis would be completed and in what order. So it wasn't always as simple as I thought it was going to be. Initially, I did think that task analysis would perhaps be the easier part because it seems such a logical process. Not logical, and you always forget the most obvious bits. That's what I really took away from the task analysis. Obviously, staff training, in order to train the staff to be able to competently use the wheelchair. We also know the sequence of tasks that we use the video that we created with myself carrying out the tasks from start to finishes. So this needed a little editing. It wasn't perfect by any means. And then staff could then watch the video and read the task analysis at the same time before supporting Mr. A. So it was really helpful. And then obviously the timely communication. So with every great plan or task analysis, it has its hiccups. You know, and so does ours. So one thing is that timely feedback and that reflection, which again, Hania, I know, is referenced to many times as well as Lee, and it's being able to communicate with each other as a team when you're working remotely really quickly to ensure that those changes happen and are amended very, very quickly to keep that momentum going, because it's very easy to lose momentum on those kind of task analysis and those support times as well, especially if you feel like something's not working and you've got nowhere to go with that. So that was a really important part for us. Next slide. Thank you. So our outcomes were really simple following the process and what was in there, that, you know, Mr. A was supported by staff to confidently use the wheelchair. So he now does access the community. We reached our goal, and he goes to places that he chooses to go to, that he enjoys going to. That's obviously reduced that frustration. It's certainly increased his contentment and his happiness. And from this, and using the different assistive technology and trying to think about how we can maintain his independence of doing things, has led to other things, such as the gentleman has got a laptop, which he has Messenger on and WhatsApp, and he now FaceTimes his family to talk to them. So it's not just on the phone, which, you know, that in itself has knock-on effects, because it really helps his memory of seeing people. So it's really positive when you get that kind of smile and everything else that goes along with it. So it's really, really quite positive. Next slide. So we did achieve our goal, which is great, but it went much further than that. So when we started supporting Mr. A to Morrison's, and the first time I'd done that with him, I was actually so unaware of how many people that the gentleman knew that worked at Morrison's and knew him as well. So the first comment from one of the staff members was, "Oh, I haven't seen you in a long time," like, you know. And I was so taken aback, actually, that, you know, that he had this network of people that as a provider I had no idea about. You know, we also found that, you know, by taking him to the shops, that he enjoyed helping other shoppers to find products, you know, and let them know something tasted good. He's quite a cheese connoisseur. He started participating in cooking at home. He got to socialise with people in the cafe, and he started trying different foods, because obviously when you're shopping with him, you know, you can kind of tell him what's good, what's not, you know, what you'd like to try. So it started exploring different avenues, which was really positive. Next slide. So the most important one for me, I think, is that Mr. A had his independence back and a sense of belonging in his own community. He didn't feel reliant on others to do for him what he could do for himself, and picking out his foods and what he liked and what he didn't. The change in his outlook on life and his motivation and demeanour can unfortunately not be captured in such a short presentation, and I've talked really fast to get it in. But, you know, obviously feel very privileged to have been a part of that journey, and seeing how that outcome has affected and made such an impact, something so very tiny that we take for granted. Next slide. Few things that I learned from doing the course that you need to consider, particularly in supported living or domiciliary care, where time can be tight. So you don't always have the ability to have a 2-to-1, one shadowing, one not. So you really need to think about the kind of areas that you want to try and implement and develop with that person, and the time allocation that's there. Obviously, some of our customers, becoming more varied and more complex. So we're not just supporting people with maybe one kind of diagnosis. Sometimes they can have multiple diagnoses, which can make things difficult as well. We also have cost. We need to think about cost because we can't overstaff projects. So it's about workarounds, how to mentor someone. Do they need to have someone present with them, or can that be done over some form of Teams or WhatsApp or video? But then when you use technology, it's also given consideration that staff members themselves need to know how to use that technology and really be comfortable with it, because again, if you don't have that in place and you start using videos, staff might then kind of do the thumbs down and go, well, it's not working for me. So there's a couple of things just to consider. Next slide. So in essence of our evaluation, I'm really looking back on it and adopting that kind of PBS approach enabled Mr. A to lead a life he wanted in the way he wanted. Not only did the approach achieve the outcome, but we achieved other outcomes as a byproduct of working through that process. I think staff, including myself, learned more about that person rather than understanding him in terms of a needs assessment. And this in turn helps staff support him in achieving a good well-being and a good quality of life, really. Next slide. And a thank you. And I finished and I got that all in, and I'm only 4 minutes over, so I'll take that as a win.
Amazing. And Jenna, we know you and I suffer from the same problems. Yeah, we can talk. We can talk.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, listen, guys, we're starting to run over. I've got Tia here, like, because we've got the keynote thing going. I just want to say thank you all so much. Working with you guys was a pleasure, but the more important thing is you guys have demonstrated that this framework, PERMA as a model, supporting that with practice leadership, you've shown what's possible, and you've all done it in your own kind of unique ways as well. It's very different, and I hope that came across to the audience today. You all had such different challenges that you faced and that you overcame. There was some tears along the way. There were some hugs. There was some laughs. There was the whole shebang. But it's real. That's service land, right? That's what we're out there doing. And I've just seen some of that. I obviously haven't really got time to go through the questions properly. Anyone that has asked a question, what we will do, I'll try and come to the panel and we'll email some of these things out. All right, I think. But some stuff here talking about from Emma Brinley, who's a fab PBS practitioner, talk about shows that not everybody needs an in-depth functional assessment, that PERM is a great framework for kind of providing that stuff. Sarah saying I agree. Unintended consequences can be positive. You all spoke about the impact this had on the teams. We know if our teams are in a good place, they're going to provide better support. Anyway, I think Tia's going to throw something at me in a minute if I don't start moving on. Thank you guys so much. Hania, I didn't want to scare you, but there's nearly 100 people here today listening in at the start. Yeah, you guys have done absolutely. You want to see the comments? They're lovely.
I'm glad I didn't know that.
So I didn't tell you. Loads of thank yous, loads of saying the work that you guys did was amazing. Thanks for sharing. Collaboration's brilliant. So look, and it's just brilliant, Fiona, to have you as a commissioner that's had this level of interest and involvement throughout the process and continuing to revisit this stuff. It's just a fantastic, and even at the start of this, you allowed us to be creative in terms of what we're looking at designing and that kind of thing. So look, what a wonderful thing to have been involved with. You guys are just fab. Tia's going to strangle me. Thank you. We need to come out of the panel. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that listened in.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later, folks. Save chat. Save questions. Okay. Okay. Cool. Great. See you in a minute, folks.